This is a video for the green group to do lesson 22. What you'll do is you'll follow along and watch as I demonstrate a section, or I'll give you instructions on how to solve problems in each section. And then I will tell you to pause the video, which is when you will complete the problems. Once you've completed each section, you can go back and unpause the video and continue on to the next section. When you're done, you have to make sure to check in with the teacher so that they can check your work to make sure it's accurate, or they will let you know where to go back and make corrections. So right now, before you get started, open up Notability and start a new note for lesson 22, and you'll put the problems in there just like you would if a teacher was running the lesson with you. So go ahead and open up your Notability and get your textbook and workbook ready to start the lesson. Okay, we're going to start lesson 22 in the textbook. So open up your textbook to 22 part 1. And these are all addition problems that have 5 as one of the small numbers. So what I want you to do is on your touch math sheet that has your numbers with the dots, is I want you to think of the number that is not 5. So for this first one here, I see 9 plus 5. So in my head, I'll have 9, and then I touch on the next one. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right, if I was doing 4 plus 5, I'm still going to use the 5 on the touch math sheet, and I'm going to start at 4 and then go 5, 6, 7, and so on. So I want you to use the 5. You're going to start with the other number that's not 5, and then you're going to be counting forward for each problem. So right now is when you pause the video, solve all of the problems in part 1, and once you've finished that, come back for part 2. Okay, so for part 2, I'll read what it says in the box so you can follow along in your textbook. It says, sometimes a letter is used instead of a box in a number family. The letter works just like the box, it's the missing number. So in other lessons when we've gone through it and we've read the problems together and it will say the second small number is a box, what they're introducing you to in this lesson is that instead of writing box, we're going to write a letter. And the letter is just holding the place until we can solve the problem and figure out which number the letter stands for. So let's do A together. So let's read what it says first. It says the first small number is 14 and the second small number is J. The big number is 66. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a number family just like I would as if they were asking for box, but this time they're asking for a number. So I'll make my number family, and it says the first small number is 14. So here, with the first small number, I'm going to put that on the line because we know that 2 small numbers will go on the line, and a big number goes at the end of the line. So my first small number, 14, is in place. Then it says that the second small number is J. So here, where the second small number would go, I'm going to write the letter J. Going back to the problem, it says the big number is 66. So here, at the end of the line, I can remember that a big number will go because I'm like pointing at it like, oh my gosh, it's so big. I need to put it at the end of the line because it's a big number. So we know that the big number is 66. So when I'm looking at my number family now, I know that I have a big number, and I know that I have one of my small numbers, but we don't know what J stands for yet. So if I'm going to think to myself, do I need to add or subtract to figure out this mystery number? And I know that if I'm missing a small number, I need to subtract, so I'm just going to set it up the same way that I would as if there was a box there. So I know that I need to subtract because I'm missing a small number. So when I'm doing my problem here, I know that 6 minus 4 is 2, and 6 minus 1 is 5. So in order to put my answer back into the problem, I take the number here, and I need to replace the J. So what I do is I cross out the J and write 52 right there. And that's all I have to do to solve the problem. So when you're doing the rest of them, B, C, and D, read it, set up your number family just like this, decide whether you need to add or subtract, solve the problem, and then take your answer and put it right above the letter. So go ahead and pause the video here and solve all of the problems in part 2, and once you've finished, come back for part 3. Okay, so for part 3, we've been working with number families where one of the small numbers is 5. So what they want you to do here is you have to write both addition facts, which means you have to write 2 facts for A and 2 facts for B. The rest of the instructions say to start the first fact with the first small number. So when I'm writing fact number 1, I'm going to start with the first small number, which is 5, and then I'm going to write the rest of my addition fact. When I go to do the second addition fact, I know that I'm not going to start with 5 again, so this time I'm going to start with the other small number. Okay, and then I'm going to fill it in same way for B. When I start with B, I need to look at which one is the first small number and start my first addition fact with that number underneath. So go ahead and solve the problems for part 3, pause the video, and then come back for the next section. So for part 4, these are all number families that have a small number of 4. So we're going to be using the number 4 on the Touch Math sheet. And the instructions say to write the subtraction fact for each family. So when I'm using the subtraction fact, I know that I have to work backwards down the arrow because I need to figure out what box means. So if I know that I'm missing a small number, I know that I need to subtract. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the big number in my head, and I'm going to use this number on my Touch Math sheet. So I'm going to think 5 in my head, and then I'm going to count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I know that 1 is my missing number that I have in the box. So I want you to use the 4 on your Touch Math sheet. Use the big number, the number that's not 4, and that's what you're going to use to start out with when you count backwards on the 4 on the Touch Math sheet. So go ahead and finish A, B, C, and D with your subtraction problems. Pause the video, and then when you come back for the next section, have your workbook ready. So the next section is in your workbook, so get your workbook ready for lesson 22, part 1. And what they're showing you here is that they have a grid and they have dots, but they don't have a rectangle. All they show you here is this little circle where 0 is. And what we're going to do is we're going to make our own rectangle and draw the sides in, but first we have to draw the line. So if we're starting here at 0, 0, this arrow is telling us this way we need to go 3 spaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start and do, this is 0, which makes this one 1. So this is not 1, this is 0. 0, 1, 2, 3. And what I do then is I put like a little circle on that dot to remind me that I went 1, 2, 3 spaces. That's going to be one of the corners of our rectangle. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start back at 0, and this one's telling me I have to go up this way 9 squares. All right, so if I go up 9, remember this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way up there, and I'm going to put a little circle for that corner. So right now I've got 1 corner, 2 corners, 3 corners. What I need to do is I need to make another corner over here for my rectangle. So you're going to figure that out. You're going to figure out where does the corner go in order to make a perfect rectangle. Then once you have 4 corners, you're going to take a ruler and you're going to draw a line to connect each dot. Once you've done that, this line over here is you have to write your multiplication problem. You have to count how many squares this way times how many squares this way and write the answer. And remember, you need a unit name of squares, right? So whatever your answer is, it's not complete unless it also says squares. So pause the video here. Go ahead and put your dots for your corners. Figure out where the other corner goes. Draw lines to outline it and do your multiplication answer. And then come back for part 2 when you're done. So for part 2 in your workbook, you have to complete the greater than or less than sign to show which side is more and which is less. So remember to touch the side that is more and then make the sign big next to that number and then small. So the sign is either going to look like this, with this being the big side and this being the small side, or it's going to look like this, where this is the big side, meaning your big numbers over here and your small numbers over here. The other way, obviously, to remember it is that your alligator is hungry and wants to eat the most, so it's going to eat the big number. All right, so looking at the example I have up top here, is I have 8 and I have 80. So when I'm looking at that, I know that 80 is the big number, so I'm going to draw my alligator to be eating the bigger number. All right, it's big on the big number side, and it's small on the small number side. So go ahead and fill in for this section A, B, C, D, the sign for greater than or less than to make sure that you are showing which one is more and which one is less. So pause the video here and then come back for part 3. So the last part of the workbook that we'll do together is part 3 of the workbook, and you'll see that there are subtraction problems here. One of the things that you have to be careful for is that sometimes you're going to need to borrow, but it's not always going to be in the ones column. So here, if I'm looking at the ones column, I can see 5 minus 4. That works because 5 is bigger than 4, which means that I can just go ahead and subtract. But just because I don't have to borrow here, now that I'm going to be in the tens column, I have 6 minus 7, which I can't do because 6 is a smaller number. So that means that I'm going to have to start borrowing in the tens column from next door. So that's what you're going to have to be careful for, is that don't think that just because you didn't have to borrow in the ones column that you're not going to have to borrow for the rest of the problem either. So be very careful. Each column you have to look at on your own and ask yourself, can I do this subtraction or do I have to borrow? So go ahead and pause the video, work on part 3. This is the last section of the actual lesson, so once you are done with part 3, you need to take your textbook work and your workbook and find a teacher who is available who can check your answers before you go on to your independent work. Don't go on to your independent work until you've checked with a teacher and they've been able to see if you need to make any corrections. All right, pause the video and then check with a teacher when you're done. When you do get to the homework, there is sections in both the workbook and the textbook for today's lesson. So both the workbook and textbook have homework that need to be done.